My name's Paul Nobbs and I represent IBS. Okay, look, we're seeing many factors that are having a dramatic impact on the supply chain in Asia. We're seeing a shift in supply from traditionally China to emerging economies like Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia, for example. We're seeing double-digit growth in those economies, which is putting a lot of pressure on the supply chain. We're seeing much closer connectedness of the end consumer to manufacturers in many cases, particularly from developed countries like Singapore, Australia or Europe or the US. And what that's doing is putting continued margin pressure on manufacturing and supply chain and further having to drive efficiencies through economies in the supply chain execution because of that increased margin pressure. Okay, look, obviously huge opportunity. The opportunity for growth is massive. For the organisations that can understand the explosion of data which is driving the supply chain and can really harness that and mine it, there's a big opportunity to have a much better understanding of what's happening, to become closer connected to their consumers and ultimately to grab more market share, but also to capitalise on the growth that is occurring. Look, from a technology perspective, and speaking from IBS's perspective, I think the opportunity to understand big data, because if we look at the amount of transactions that are happening in the supply chain, there's a shift from full container load shipment, for example, to parcel delivery. There's a shift to far more delivery points as wholesalers distribute to end consumers versus retailers. So the opportunity to mine that data, to understand it, and conduct deep analytics into consumer behaviour patterns are really important for the future. I think there's also it's always been a challenge in the supply chain to match supply with demand. It's a very simple thing to say, it's a very tough thing to do. And as demand becomes more unpredictable, can grow faster, can shrink faster, product life cycles become shorter, the importance to master the S&OP process is increasingly important. So top three challenges: better understanding of the customer. So traditionally a manufacturer would not be connected to an end consumer and often separated by several nodes in the supply chain. So the challenge is for manufacturers, if they're supplying more directly to end consumers, to gain customer insight and analytics. So that's number one challenge. Number two challenge, driving efficiencies in the supply chain in the face of increased margin pressures. That's been something that's been around for a long time, but I think that is accelerating, and the companies that cannot harness technology available to drive those efficiencies will suffer as a result of that. And thirdly, I guess I answered before, but matching supply with demand and being able to predict demand is always been a challenge, and it's becoming tougher and tougher and tougher. IBS today have a number of tools to help. Workflow has been a technology that's been around for a number of years, but not really embraced by companies across applications, across business entities, across functions. So the capability to have an integrated workflow with back-end applications and with office tools like email, for example, is incredibly important. IBS provides a new tool today for supply and operations planning. The supply planning part of it is totally different to what is embedded within a traditional ERP system and the logic that is used, whereby we use an upper and a lower control limit around weeks on hand and enable a manufacturer or distributor to manage inventory to a target within those control limits, as opposed to the traditional way of thinking where I have a set reorder point that triggers the replenishment of inventory. So new tools to help manage the flow of inventory through the supply chain, which is quite innovative as an example. The S&OP tool that I've just talked about is a new product. We've been launching that in Australia. We're currently implementing our first major project, but that will be launched on a global basis later this year. We've got new products in mobility coming onto the market for enabling Salesforce through iPad or iPhone or Android applications, as an example, to manage the customer interface, so understanding customer order patterns, being able to promote items to customers, and simple things like being able to do credit checks or check stock on hand as an example. This event has been excellent. We've had exposure to companies from across Southeast Asia. We've been able to have the opportunity to explain new technologies and how we can help other organisations. It's been an excellent event. We will definitely be here next year. You can sign me up now.